Hi, everybody, and welcome to Storyland with Graham LaShawn Ruth. Today, we will be reading Kicked Out of the North Pole, written and illustrated by A.T. Pressley. Shall we get started? Far, far away in the land of snow lived Santa and his elves in the place called the North Pole. Every year, they would invite three little children to experience toys and candy that are not sold but are given. St. Nick's secret helpers appeared at a local mall saying, "Take a picture with Santa and win a free trip. Come one, come all." In the bedroom of a ticket winner's appeared a bright red portal. All the kids stared, but they did not seem startled. When the portal opened big and wide, they heard jingle bells coming from the other side. After smelling the sweet twisted candy, the boy sniffed and sighed. "That's quite dandy." Grabbing her glowing ticket, the girl was also ready to take a curious ride. So both kids stepped through the portal onto the licorice slide. The third child, when told to clean his room, he always disobeyed. Stepping over the mess he made, the boy slipped on his skateboard. "Oh no!" he yelled as the portal opened, falling inside. Twirling out of control, he joined the other two children on the candy slide. All together, they screamed for joy. The clumsy kid slid head first behind a little girl and a handy boy. They were spinning so fast and out of control. Suddenly, out slid all three before a 12-foot tall candy pole. The awkward boy did not know the North Pole was a large peppermint stick. Once he smelt the sweet winter mint, he stuck out his tongue, causing it to almost freeze to the landmark after taking one tiny lick. They traveled to Holly Jolly Land in the cold, cold snow. When the candy cane gates opened, the boy in the cap said, "Is this the winter wonderland? Let's go." Filled with joy, they began to skip and hop. The Nutcracker said to the kid in the cap, "Stop." The soldier bent down and began to whisper, "Hey kid, could you grab some chestnuts from inside? Our smackers are starting to blister." Helping was not on this kid's mind. He turned his back and said, "Sorry, big guy," and walked on inside. At the admission stand, the kids were stamped with gumdrop candy. Once they read the rules, they were given tasks that were handy. The girl named Anna had her very own cookbook. She smiled when the elf said, "Maybe you can help girl elf, Brooke." Taz was a handy-looking fellow who has a pencil over his ear. That is yellow. He could carve wood like hairy elf Stan. Taz wore boots like St. Nick and a Christmas sweater that read, "Santa's biggest fan." The elves at the admission stand took a second glance when they saw the third kid wearing oversized pants. The younger elf asked, "What's your name, little boy with a cap on your head?" The kid gripped his jacket and smirked. "My name is Fred." The elder elf squinted, not sure what to make of Fred. He seemed nice until they read the cap on his head. The elves decided to put the second gate back down after reading "Bad to the Bone" when Fred turned his hat around. The shirt he wore had a big S, which did not seem haughty. Elfish was the smaller word across, which made it quite naughty. The elf asked, "What's your talent, Fred? What can you create?" He answered, "I don't like to work. I just want to play." Not to judge, not to judge. The elves learned all too well. Show the children Holly Jolly Land and listen for the bell. They were given a tour on the Chico Stick bus, while all the elves hustled and bustled in a rush. The children learned that elves have fun too, as they watched them play, ski, and golf. From the back of the bus, Fred saw his chance and snuck right off. Fred watched an ice sculptor named Macho Elf. Amazed by his ice snowman, Fred wondered how it felt. He touched its limb as the iceman stood happy and grand. Once Fred pulled away, the branch snapped off, freezing to his hand. He used a heater to melt the ice from his glove next to the sculpture the artist loved. He failed to look where he knelt, knocking the sculpture over, causing it to melt. When the jingle bells rang, elves knew playtime had to stop. They ran from all over, returning to their labeled toy shops. Fred continued to play, refusing to yield. He jumped over the miniature golf fence and ran into the other field. Mrs. Claus set a plate of warm cookies on her windowsill. Fred reached out his hand, hoping to give his tummy a fill. His eyes widened and his belly began to rumble, thinking how the cookies will feel against his teeth as they crunched and crumbled. So, Fred stole Santa's treats, eating them as he ran around the block. No one saw him except Rudolph grazing in the reindeer lot. Fred ate the cookies while walking over to where the reindeer grazed. Watching him munch on Santa's treats, several of the deer looked amazed. He greeted them name by name. Hey, Dasher and Dancer, Prancer and Vixen. Hello, Comet and Cupid, Dondit and Bliston. Fred tossed a piece of cookie only to those who listened. Fred thought only baby reindeer were covered in little white spots. He grabbed a paintbrush, dipped in yellow, and played Connect the Dots. Meanwhile, Taz twiddled wood with the hairy elf Stan. Elves gathered around to see the wooden masterpiece he held in his hand. Anna joined Elfbrook to give away some tasty confections. Taz agreed to a taste test, while elves scurried in rejection. Anna's cupcakes they did not hate, but Brooke's cupcakes they were in fear of a tummy ache. Fred ran over to a building that looked like a giant fishbowl. He read the sign up high and learned that it was a water-filled factory snow globe. Fred noticed a plug on a string, big in size. He wondered, if I pull it out, will the globe drip dry? Quickly, he yanked it with one big tug, causing the water to rush out like a flood. Fred snuck into the Stuff and Stuff shop, where elves filled, fluffed, and inspected toys. The elves sang with Christmas cheer and holiday joy. Fred snatched a cogwheel off the factory motor while elves were looking. Instead of putting it back, he replaced it with a half-eaten chocolate chip cookie. All the elves gasped as he caused it to crackle, clunk, and steam. They became furious because Fred broke their centuries-old cogwheels machine. An angry elf that was not always mean yelled, "Let's get him before he breaks another thing." Fred did not know that the elves were mad. He thought they were chasing him in a game of tag. He laughed after sticking a candy cane into a dispenser, releasing a few balls. The chase almost ended when elves began to trip, slip, and fall. Knock, knock, knock. Mrs. Claus wondered, oh my, who could that be? She fastened her robe and rushed to the door, and what did she see? Her front lawn was filled with elves she could not number, but why were they so angry? She began to wonder. Nick's not home at the moment, she answered with dismay. With her face covered in green slime, she said, he went ice fishing, but he should be on his way. All the elves complained and expressed their feelings with no hesitation. Dripping wet, they approached Santa's doorstep, filled with frustration. When Santa arrived, the boy had nothing to say. The elf was silent that night as they took him to no elf was silent that night as they took him to Holly Jolly Court to decide if he should stay. Elves knew naughty would be the verdict, and Fred was destined to get a cold. They all stood before Santa and yelled, "Out of the North Pole he must go." Santa said, Now, let's hear what the little boy plead." Standing convicted with a poked out lip, Fred lowered his head and answered, "Naughty, will you forgive me, please?" An apology goes a long way here at the North Pole, as well as a confession. The elves gathered together in a huddle, then gave their solemn decision. Fred could not believe the mercy and grace they had shown to even consider letting him stay. "You can go, Fred," said Saint Nick. Then he dropped the gavel, and the boy was on his merry way. Fred jumped for joy and shouted, "Hip, hip, hooray!" He tripped over the judgment tape typed by reporter elf May. But they gave a decree: no more folly or out you go from the land of jolly. Fred ran so fast he could barely breathe. Filled with glee, he leaped outside and knocked down a dangling Christmas wreath. "Oh no," he cringed as it swung from left to right. Once the wreath hit the ground, someone turned on the festival of lights. He tried to pick it up and hang it back, but he stumbled. Fred dropped it a second time after he heard a loud rumble. Santa burst through the double doors, causing Fred to freeze in sight. Before he could reach out his hand, Santa ran the wreath over with his peppermint wheel motorbike. Santa said, "You know my clause. I too will give you a second chance." He then gave the boy a wink with a joyful yet a firm glance. Fred replied, "I'll show you I can do better. Just you wait and see." Fred's eyes widened and agreed to disagree when he saw the world's largest forbidden Christmas tree. What was told to every visitor: from any tree you may smell, stare, and touch, but this one to touch you can do no such. For one curious grip, out he reached his hand. Touching the forbidden tree caused a power outage across the land. Elves tinkering, bells ringing, suddenly came to an end. Whosoever touched the tree, the elves were told to apprehend. In the dark, Fred stood frozen like Jack. He could not believe touching the tree would make Holly Jolly Land go black. The chief elf said, "The sign said, 'Do not touch.' It is written in red because you did not obey. Out of Holly Jolly Land, it is with you, Fred." The temptation was too strong a decision Fred had to make. Holding the ornament in his hand, he replied, "This was one rule I had to break." The chief elf cried, "You touched the forbidden tree. This will not do." Because Fred broke the decree, the elf whistled for Butch and Terry, saying, "Boys, bring the shoe." This is no ordinary shoe, but a catapult boot positioned up high. In an instant, up Fred went as two elves cranked it up with a sigh. The boot whacked his bottom in one big swoop, causing Fred to yell out a gut-wrenching hoot. Why didn't he obey? Why wouldn't he try? Mrs. Claus stated. gripping the plate. Not again, oh my. Fred held the candy cane tight while flying in midair. He wondered, how am I supposed to land without a parachute here? Everyone waved goodbye as if he was with Saint Nick. Fred wanted to fly, but not from a boot kick. What was his fate once he hit the ground? Elves knew the landing was soft once he hit the snow mound. Passing over the Holly Jolly Land's wall, Fred tried to use the candy cane to break his fall. As he fell in front of the giant nutcracker, the stick broke in half, hitting the soldier's smacker. Being kicked out of the North Pole was not the desire of this little mister. He continued to sit in the cold, fluffy snow, feeling foolish while his bottom continued to blister. On the hill of snow, Fred sat in dismay. He cheered, "Here comes Santa on his fully loaded sleigh." But he remembered, I did not follow the rules. I did not take his advice, and even I know that was not very nice. When Santa tossed out a red stamped envelope, Fred saw and knew it was his time to go. Fred caught it, then read, "Naughty" on the other side of the letter. Mr. Claus yelled, "Kid, I know you can do better. Now come back when you're really ready to fly." He snapped the reins and flew right by. Fred learned his lesson on this holiday. When you are invited to the North Pole, do not disobey. Instead, follow the rules, be helpful, and be nice. For Santa and his helpers have no problem tossing disobedient kids out on the snowy ice. No longer wanting to be naughty and on a new path to being nice, Fred pinned the letter to his wall and took St. Nick's advice. Learn from the gift that came to change everyone's life. He was amazed how a baby in a manger could become a man that is the way, truth, and the life. After reading the letter, Fred was on a mission to change his ways. He cleaned his room, fell to his knees, and began to pray. His parents were filled with joy, witnessing his transformation that day. He jumped up, prepared to be selfless this time, trying hard not to disobey. Fred learned repentance is to make right your wrongs and change your selfish ways. He was taught all too well, being saved by grace is not by work, but by believing in Jesus Christ through faith. Being joyful and filled with gratitude, Fred fixed everything he had broken with a brand new attitude. The page doesn't want to turn. All right, here we go. Merry Christmas. All have been naughty, only one has been nice. He became the sacrifice, so we all may have eternal life. So take my advice, get to know him and trust him. Turn from your